So when it comes to real estate, there's a lot of moving pieces and there's a lot of things that will affect your profit margins. There's nothing that'll affect your profit margins like the ability to negotiate. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna teach you a step-by-step process, actually 10 steps in one power step to make you an incredible negotiator. After 2 decades in the business, after 3,400 deals, I have negotiated millions and millions and millions of dollars of transactions. I kind of consider myself to be somewhat of an expert in this. Here's the great thing about negotiations. It is actually a skill set that could be taught and learned. So let's get into the 10 effective steps that you need to take to become an amazing negotiator. And then we got a bonus one afterwards that'll make you the most money. All right, step number 1 in negotiations, you got to frame it the right way. What do I mean by that? You got to set up the surroundings. You're 1,000 more times effective being face-to-face to someone. So when you're negotiating a deal, do whatever you have to do to physically be with them. In their home, a third-party location like Starbucks, fight for that. Now, there's going to come times where you're dealing with an out-of-state owner. Use technology, right? All our phones have FaceTime, Skype. The reason you want to do this is because, as you will see as we go down further down the line of negotiations, to be able to read their emotion. And the way you read someone's emotion is when you're looking at them face to face. This is a big one. Step number 2, get the seller to say the price first. Look, negotiations is all about moving the needle, right? You want to move that needle as much your way as possible. Ever heard of a city called Las Vegas, right? Their needle is only like 52% their way. They're building billion-dollar buildings with that 2% edge. This is a big one. They say, and when it comes to negotiations, he who says the price first loses up to 75% of the time when it comes to negotiations. The magic number here is 6. I'll ask the seller 6 times for a price before I back away. This is big. Step 3, have the seller negotiate against themselves. How's that possible? Not only is it possible, I do it all the time. So when you finally get that price out of a seller, right? Let's say it happens to be $100,000. I will never counter that $100,000. I'll ask probing questions. Well, Mr. Seller, if I can close quicker, what will you take? $97,000. What if I pay all cash? What if I have no contingencies? What if, as long as the seller keeps on coming down without me ever having to give a price, I've had sellers come down 15 to 20% off their own price without me ever countering. Have the seller negotiate against themselves. Ask the what if questions until they stop, and that's when you back away. This is a good one. Number 4, the rule of 3. Rule 3 is very important because if you think about it, what is negotiations? Negotiations is really the act of going back and forth. But when do you stop? Like, when do you stop pressing that seller? Rule of 3. When the seller says the price 3 times in a row, the same price, I know I'm backing away. Okay? So I will negotiate it as far as I have to, as much as I have to, as hard as I have to, until the seller repeats the same price 3 times. That's my limit. Step number 5, the rule of shut up. Now, this is very important. Every negotiations hits this point. The rule of shut up comes into effect when you, as a negotiator, say a price. So anytime during the negotiations you give a price, shut up. Don't say a word. Because if you start talking before the seller does, what you're doing really subconsciously is you're justifying. And you don't want to get in the business of justification. So anytime you say a price, shut up. No matter how uncomfortable it gets, don't say a word. Step number 6, lowball. This is a big one. And this is the one that gets most people the most uncomfortable to execute. So what I mean by lowball is this. Let's say a seller says $100,000 is what I'm asking. I'm immediately lowballing. I'm lowballing about $40,000 to $45,000. Not because I'm hoping to get it for $40,000, $45,000. By the way, if he says yes, that's a great win. The reason I'm lowballing is I want to see the emotion, how they will respond. So for instance, he's like 100, I'm like 45, and he's like, Pete, get out of my house. You know what I'm interpreting that as? I'm way off. He says 100, I say 45, and he's like, gosh, wow, I didn't know it was going to be that low. Oh, let me sleep on it. Guess what? Those are all amazing, amazing triggers to know I might not get it for 45, but I'm in a ballpark. So do not be afraid to lowball, because what you're doing there is you're not literally lowballing hoping to get that price. You're lowballing to see, are you in the ballpark or not, right? Don't be afraid to lowball. Step number 7, counter. You'll be shocked how many investors I've talked to that I'm like, how'd the deal go? Oh, it didn't work out. Well, why didn't it work out? Well, I offered 70 and they said no. Did you counter? No, they just didn't take my price. So here's what happens in the negotiations. Let's say they start at 100. Let's say you come back at 50. And let's say they say no deal. Lead the seller. Because a lot of times people do think the deal is dead at that point. No, so what I'm going to say when he says no to 50, I'm going to prompt him. I'm going to say, Mr. Seller, what's your counter? Be proactive. And when you're countering and telling the other person to counter, you're slowly getting that price lower and lower and lower. Always counter. Number 8, rule of 15. This is where deals go to die. Again, perfect scenario. Hey, what happened on that deal? Oh, Pete, it didn't happen. Why didn't it happen? Well, because I needed to buy for 70 and the seller was only willing to sell it for 75. That's a deal. Rule of 15% simply says this: if you're within 15% of where you need to be, get it under contract. Remember, negotiations is a process. It's not just a one meeting to see if we can get the deal done. There's some negotiations I've done on deals that have taken 6 to 7 months. Rule of 15%, if you get the price within 15% of where you ultimately need to be, get it under contract. Step number 9, tee up renegotiations. Remember, negotiations is a process. It's an extensive process. It's a process that takes place over multiple steps. Renegotiations is one of those steps. So here's what I mean by that. Let's say I get the property tied up under contract. I am immediately setting the standard, setting the expectations that we're going to get a lower price. Here's how I do that. I get the property tied up, and as I'm leaving the seller, as I'm hanging up with the seller, however the meeting took place, I'll say something like this. All right, listen, we obviously got our inspection time in here. I'm going to get the guys in there. They're going to take a look at if any work needs to be done, and then, this is the key, I'll call you with what the costs are going to be. I didn't tell them I'm going to do a price drop. I'm just dropping these words, kind of like subliminal messages that, hey, we're going to be doing some renegotiations. We're going to get the price lower. A ton of money to be made on the renegotiation side. Step number 10, renegotiate. Now, this one takes place usually around the time of inspection when we're trying to figure out what's wrong with the house. By the way, there's something wrong with any house. So here's how we do this one. I'll call the seller back. I'll say something like, the guys went in there, they did their inspections, and I'll throw a number out. And they're telling me it's like $20,000 to fix. You need some AC work, some paint, all this. Now here's the key. There's times when you're negotiating, kind of a little bit butting heads. There's times where you actually buddy up to the person. During renegotiations, you buddy up. So I'll say something like this. Mr. Smith, I tell you what, they're coming back with like $20,000. Tell you what, I'm going to eat half of that. I wasn't expecting it. I'm going to eat half. And here's the line that's going to make you a lot of money. Mr. Smith, can you help me out with the other half? See, I buddied up to them. I became his friend. Like, can you help me out? Think about last time somebody asked you to help them. When was the last time you said no? So there's a time when you're kind of going toe-to-toe, and there's times where you're buddying up. During negotiations, you're buddying up. Hey, can you give me a hand? You'll make a lot of money using these lines. We have now gone through 10 steps in negotiations. I'm going to give you the money play right here. I'm about ready to tell you something's going to make you more money than all those steps put together, even brilliantly executed. I'm about ready to share with you something that even if you didn't even get those 10 steps, you're like, Pete, I can't lowball. I don't feel comfortable talking. The bonus, this is going to make you more money than anything. I'm going to give you a secret. This power step is probably responsible for 80% of all the negotiations that I've done. 80% of all the price drops have come as a result of this step. Interestingly enough, this is also the most overlooked step when it comes to negotiations. So let's say you went through your negotiations, and now obviously if you got a deal, we're moving on, we're closing, we're making money. But let's face it, more times than none, it's not going to be a deal. This will make it a deal. The follow-up. The follow-up. Because when you go into the follow-up mode, you will actually have the most powerful negotiations tool that exists. And that is this: time. You'll have time working for you. See, in the world of real estate, as real estate investors, what are we trying to time? We're trying to time some kind of an event in a seller's life. That's what gets them to do price drops, right? People don't wake up one day out of the blue and say, well, my house is worth $100,000. Let me see if I can sell it for $30 today. I don't know if that's ever happened. But here's what does happen. People get hit with divorces, health issues, job changes. People go through pandemics. Those are the things that create motivated sellers. And in the follow-up mode, you have time in your hands. And as long as you're following up, it is very possible that the person you're going to follow up with consistently over an extended period of time will have an event take place that'll all of a sudden make him go from unmotivated to motivated. Number two, you have to have a bunch of follow-ups. If all you're doing is follow up with one seller, well, you're just kind of like on pins and needles that something goes wrong in that person's life. And you don't want to do that. But if you're following up with like 100, then not only is time on your hand, but numbers are on your hand. Here's the other good news about follow-up. As much as those 10 negotiation steps were important and critical, follow-up is the easiest of all. Because what do you do during a follow-up? Hey, Mr. Smith, it's Peter. Has anything changed? No, Pete, nothing's changed. Okay. 30 days later, Mr. Smith, it's Pete again. Anything? No. 30 days later, Mr. Smith, anything changed? You're not going to believe it. My job is just moving across the country. Mr. Smith, we may need to get together, don't we? This is how I've done over 80% of all of my deals. This is how my negotiators have negotiated thousands of real estate transactions for me. Not because they were brilliant negotiators, because we were brilliant at the follow-up. Guys, we just went through some very, very powerful steps. Some of these steps could be very overwhelming, I know, because they were so overwhelming for me when I got started. But there's another option. How would you like to have myself or a member of my team negotiate deals on your behalf? Yeah, that's a legitimate option. I actually partner with people all over the United States, and not only do we help you with negotiations, we do so much more. We get involved in all facets of this business. We'll teach you how to do it. We'll help you find deals. I'll even front all the money to buy the deals, and then we split the profits in the back end. To learn more how you could become one of my partners, follow the link below. See all the amazing benefits. Connect with a team member. We could be doing deals literally within a few days. Hey, if you love this content, please subscribe. Ring the bell so you'll be notified every time I drop a gem. And beyond everything else, watch the next video. I got some incredible stuff in there.